Good evening and welcome to AdWords Bootcamp, or otherwise known as AdWords Academy, with Mike Rhodes. I am Brian Todd, and I really just want to thank you for being here and compliment you on making a very, very good choice as far as your own business is concerned, because AdWords continues to be the best machine, the best direct marketing machine for predictably generating traffic and getting all the feedback you need to make sure that it's profitable for you, that you will find anywhere in the world. And the next 8 sessions that you have with Mike Rhodes, like we said, will cover soup to nuts. And make sure that you have all the fundamentals of AdWords under your belt by the time the series is over. And I know you're going to benefit from this, and I know it's going to expand your thinking and expand your skills and disciplines and your understanding of marketing, and you'll just be a better person for it. So again, you know Mike, he hails from Melbourne, Australia, where it's a lot warmer than where I am right now, but
Yes.
nevertheless, Mike, it's always a treat to have you on. I'm looking at your first slide, and it says mindset. So
Yeah.
why don't you
Little,
tell
little,
me what you got for us?
little different this year. In the past, we've always started with the big picture, but I was really drilling into, well, what does that look like, and have changed it a little. It may come as a little bit of a shock, and in a minute, I'm going to see the number of people on the call drop by 100. But I'm
Just
not
kidding.
actually going to dig into an AdWords account today. This is the 1 week that we won't. I want to take up in the helicopter today and a bigger look at all of this, set the scene for what's coming, certainly give you a little bit of homework to do before the next call next week, and also just to help make sure that we're all on the same page. So we're going to talk about a number of different mindsets. Your mindset as you go through this course, the mindset of the person searching Google, the mindset of your client if you're doing this for clients. And I'll use this interchangeably. I realize that some of us on the call are running it for our own businesses, and that's fantastic, spending our own money, awesome. Others are doing this as a consultant, be that you've just started out, you're a one-man band, you've been doing this for a while, or you're working in an agency and just looking to improve your skills. So this is applicable to all of those. And since we're talking about helicopters, I'll talk about planes. This is what AdWords used to look like 10 years ago when I started. I used to be a pilot, so I quite like plane analogies. It was a bit like flying a small plane. You've heard me say this before, no doubt. Flying a small plane is dead easy. It's like a car, it just goes up and down. Anyone can do it with very little training. These days, AdWords looks a bit more like this. It is infinitely more complex. There are many, many more buttons to press and levers to pull, and more people get hurt when you get it wrong. There's a lot of overwhelm around AdWords, and that first and foremost is what my job is to clear up over the next 8 weeks, is to get you from overwhelm to calm, to give you more clarity around what all of these things are and what they mean, to increase your capabilities in all of these areas so that you know which of these many things to pick and choose from, and increase your confidence in these areas. And these are all of the different ways that you can use AdWords. We mentioned it on the Q&A call a couple of hours ago. When many people talk Google AdWords, they're actually talking about the second thing here that you see on the screen, what we call non-brand search terms, i.e. somebody searching for the product or the service that you sell. Now, I am going to use terms like non-brand. I'm going to explain what RLSA means, but I'm not going to go super basic and explain what a keyword is, what ad copy means. I'm going to assume a certain level of knowledge. I'm going to assume that if you're in Planet Perry and have been here for a little while, the basics are covered. If not, if words like campaign and ad confuse you, there will be a glossary. If it's not there already, it'll be there by the end of the day or the end of tomorrow in your members area, which is from the back of our book, and that will help get you up to speed with all of these terms. And something that Robert Kiyosaki said to me many years ago: when you're learning something new, the first thing that you need to do is learn the vocabulary, because once you learn the vocabulary, everything else starts to make a heck of a lot more sense. Think about, be that a foreign language or something like this, learn the vocabulary first. So if some of the terms I'm yelling at do not make sense, obviously drop them in the members in the chat window, in the question pad, and Brian or I will give you a quick answer if we can. But if a chunk of it isn't making sense, then the glossary is going to be a good place to start. By the end of the 8 weeks, you will not only know what all of this means, you'll know what they are and when to use them and how to use them. So from the top, we've got search ads, non-branded search ads, people looking for the things that you sell. RLSA, which stands for remarketing lists for search ads, and that's a way that you can combine the remarketing lists that we're going to go build with search ads so that you can bid differently, quite simply, depending on whether or not someone's been to your site before. If they've been to your site, you may decide, oh, they're still looking for that thing. They've been to my site, but they haven't bought from me yet, but they're still looking for it. Maybe I want to bid more to get back in front of that person. Maybe if they've been to the customer area or the member area or the client area of your site, you can stop showing those people ads because people are lazy. They'll keep searching for your name and they'll keep clicking on your ad, costing you money. And if you've already sold to them, maybe you want to stop that. So we'll explain all of this as we go through remarketing. You know by now I'm a massive remarketing fan. We're going to talk about YouTube and a very hot topic at the moment, which is video remarketing. So how to combine your YouTube with your remarketing.
By the way, I'll mention I actually have the glossary from the Ultimate Guide to Google AdWords. I have that Word document sitting right here on my desktop. And so within reason, if there's a particular naughty, confusing term that you've heard that you'd like a definition of, just say so in the question box, and I'll just copy it in. And make sure everyone sees that. So don't overwhelm me with word requests. But
well, I'll pick on the one that I think on the screen may not be in there. We don't need to write this in necessarily yet. We're going to get to this later on, and I'll give you an overview too in a minute of what the 8 weeks entails. But display select, that didn't exist in its current form when we wrote the book earlier last year. We are having wonderful fun with display select right now. That is, it is, again, it's kind of like search remarketing. You are able to show a banner ad, image ad in AdWords terms, to somebody based on the search terms that they have just been looking for. We mentioned this on the webinar last week. I use the example of Perry. If Perry wanted to show people an ad for, let's say, his 80/20 sales and marketing book, anybody that's searching for 80/20 on Google, we could choose to say to Google, look out for that person. When they search for 80/20, over the course of the next couple of hours, show them this banner ad and take them over here to the page selling the book. Or anybody searching for Richard Koch by name, Mr. 80/20. If they're searching for him, it's probably because they're interested in him and the stuff that he does, and 80/20 is a huge part of that. Show them this ad for the 80/20 book. A huge way that we're using this at the moment is competitors. So you may not want to bid on your competitor's name and show a search ad on the front page of Google for your competitors. In some industries, there's a gentleman's agreement. You don't bid on us, we don't bid on you. This is a much more sneaky way to get in front of your competitors' traffic. And this works even on a fairly small scale in a local area. I can't remember the gentleman's name who was on the Q&A webinar, but the cabinet making business in a small area. If you've got a bunch of competitors in that area, you can bid on their names. And again, I will show you exactly how to do this later on. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of the how today and all the little bits in the interface of where to go do this. For now, I just want you to know of all the things that are possible so that it all starts to fall into place. But you could go and bid on their names, and then as those prospects, those people that know of those businesses, but clearly they don't know you yet, as they wander around the internet over the next few hours, they're going to keep bumping into your ads, and you can obviously mix those ads up. You can show them different messages. You might get into what to put in your ad later on, but it's a wonderful way to, I won't say steal their traffic, but to get in front of people that are looking for other businesses by name. So that's a very quick look at all the different ways that you can use AdWords. I want to talk about the course itself. And this book had quite an impact on me. I've listened to Tim Ferriss's podcast quite a bit, and he actually calls this book The 4-Hour Chef. It's a book about learning disguised as a cooking book, which he thought was quite funny, but nobody got. Everybody just assumed it was a cooking book. But he uses this model, this DIS model, in the book. And I'll explain what DIS stands for, because it's a very powerful way of learning anything in the minimum effective time. He's learned languages in the space of weeks that most people take years and years over. And he's applied this to many, many areas, cooking being just one of them. So the D stands for deconstruction. The S, I don't know what the I's doing in there, just makes it readable. The first S stands for selection. The second S, sequencing, and the third S, stakes. So deconstruction, that's breaking it down into the component parts, the Lego blocks, if you will. These are the Lego blocks of AdWords. And again, if there are any words on there that don't make sense yet, don't panic yet, they will by the end of the 8 weeks. My job is to then pick and choose and to work out which Lego blocks are the most important, which need the most explaining. Part of that is 80-20. So this is the selection part. I cannot put every possible last little bit of AdWords into an 8-week course. It's just impossible. I've been doing this 10 years, and we're still learning all the time. Josh mentioned this morning, that Google makes about 400 changes a year. Part of this is to get all of us up to speed to a decent level where then we can start to keep up with all of those changes. But there's no point going through every single little tiny piece of what's happened over the last 10 years. The net of what's relevant and important now. And obviously you know that we are big fans of 80-20 in Planet Perry. Do me a favor, grab a pen and paper if you don't have one handy already, and draw a square on there. I don't really care what size it is. Let's say 3 inches square. That's about 7.5 centimeters if you're listening from Europe. In that square, draw a line across the square horizontally, about 3/4 of the way up. Below the line, you can write 80, and above the line, you can write 20. This is a slightly different version of 80-20, but I want to cover it because this had a big impact on me. It's Dan Sullivan's 80-20 approach. He talks about anything, any project, any task can be broken down in this manner. Below the line, that first 80% that you do is the most important, what he calls an 80% swipe. So that might be a little bit of work, but it gets the project 80% done. So we're looking at results here, not effort. We want 80% done as quickly as possible. But then you can do a second 80% swipe. So you've now got a little rectangle across the top of your square where the 20% is. If you draw a vertical line about 3/4 along there, I actually don't care which side you go on, left or right, doesn't matter. But now you're breaking that top little bit into 80-20. So you've now done a second 80% swipe of that 20% that was remaining. We're now at 96% perfect, 96% done. But by breaking it into a couple of swipes, the first 80% swipe. So let's take an example. I built this keynote 3-4 days ago, and I did the first 80% swipe very quickly. I outlined all of the points I wanted to make, got the flow right, but it was just the words. Then my second 80% swipe, I've gone back through and added in all of the images I want to help make the point a bit better. And then if need be, and usually I don't need this, but if need be, and I have done this time, I'll do a third 80% swipe. So now we can look at that little square that's up in the top corner of your square, the one you originally wrote, and we can draw another little horizontal line across there and do a third 80% swipe. at the bit that's left, now we're 99.2% perfect. And unless you're doing brain surgery or flying to the moon or something, 99.2% is going to get you more than enough most of the time. But we've made it much, much simpler now. Instead of sitting down in one go and trying to get to 99% perfect, and remember, certainly never, ever, ever trying to get to 100% perfect, because that just will not happen, and you'll never ship anything and never do anything and never finish anything. It's impossible. But now we've done 3 80% swipes. This, for me, was a game changer. I hope you agree with me, and I hope you find this useful. I've gone off on a bit of a tangent, but the power of this is when you need to do something, you've kind of got 3 choices. You can either do it immediately. If you do it immediately, just sit down and do it. As soon as you get off the phone with somebody, just sit down and do it. You're only going to be 80% happy with the results. Or you can say to yourself, I need to do a bit more research first. I need to find out a bit more about this. But as you dig deeper and deeper, you realize, God, there's so much more to learn. And AdWords is one of those things. I'll put this off, I'll put this off, I'll put this off. I start to learn it, and oh my God, I'm just scratching the surface. And I dig deeper. And so you're only going to be 80% happy, maximum, doing it that way. Or you can do what we all did when we were in school with our homework, leave it till the very last minute, rush it, cram it in, get it done just in time, and you're only 80% happy with that too. So if you know that you're only going to be 80% happy, it makes so much more sense to pick the first option and to just get it done straight away. But using this model, the 80-20 approach from Dan Sullivan, it then frees me up mentally and emotionally to then go, well, it doesn't need to be perfect. I'm only aiming for to be 80% happy. I'm not trying to get it perfect. I can do a quick swipe, knowing that I can then come back and do a second 80% swipe to get to 96% perfect. Most of the time, that's good enough. If I need to, I can sit on it for a couple of days. If I have time, I can then do a third swipe. The other key thing here is you don't need to do all the swipes. You know, it would be very feasible for me, if I wasn't such a bloody perfectionist, to do that first swipe on my keynotes and just knock everything out in Word form and then to hand it off to someone else to fill in all the pretty pictures. I don't do that because I'm too much of a perfectionist. I should probably listen to my own advice more often. But as soon as you've done your first 80% swipe, then you free yourself up to add in the skills and the genius of other people, be that on your team or other people that you're outsourcing to. But nothing can happen until you do that first 80% swipe, until you kick the project off, until you get moving in the right direction. So 80%, 80-20, and selection is a huge part of it. That was a bit of a tangent. I just that's my thinking around 80-20. I just find that incredibly useful. I hope you do too. My job here is to figure out what to put in and what to leave out so that you can start as quickly as possible and that you can be 99% perfect as quickly as possible with AdWords. And then the sequencing is important too. Yeah, go on, dive in.
I have a word for you to define, but I'll wait until you're done with this.
Okay. So then the sequencing is equally important. So a lot of thought has gone into, and Brian and I have brainstormed this many times and tweaked and refined this, of what goes into these 8 weeks so that your knowledge is building week on week. So we're starting today with mindset, and that's why we've got to lay the groundwork. And you may be surprised that we're not looking at AdWords, but this, I strongly think, will help set the scene and set everything up so that when we dig into keywords next week, we start in the right place. So keywords, what makes a good keyword, how to find them, the mindset around keywords, all of that happens next week. Module 3, we'll dig into writing great ads. I'll summarize some of the Swiss Army stuff. I'll share with you my mind map of the Swiss Army knife. There'll be lots of mind maps as we go. You may have heard Perry's story the other day when we met in Maui. I had this huge mind map printed out on an A0 piece of paper that I'd rolled up with me and taken with me on the plane, carry on, because I didn't want it to get crushed, that I laid out on the table for him in front of Maui. I can still picture that moment quite clearly, actually. What I'm going to do is give you a mind map each week. I'm very visual. I'm guessing that a number of us on the call are. That acts as a cheat sheet for you at the end of this. Each week you're going to get a mind map of that particular topic, And then at the end, we can bolt all of those mind maps together. I'll give you the file, and if you want, you can pop down to the local printing shop and print that out and stick it on your wall. There are still people I know that I gave this to 4 or 5 years ago that still have that on their office wall. It's a great cheat sheet to be able to, when you're thinking about whether that's building an account or you're trying to think about a little corner of the display network, you can just wander over, find it very quickly on the mind map and get an answer very, very quickly. So this is going to build week on week. In week 4, we're going to take the components that we've built so far, keywords and ads, and stick those together. Now, I recognize that many of us on the call already have campaigns running. Some of us don't. So by the end of week 4, we'll all be on the same level playing field, and we'll all be sitting there with live accounts running and collecting data. Not everybody is at that place yet, but we'll really dig in week 4 of how to structure the account, because that's a huge, huge part of the game. Get that right and everything else becomes much easier, not least how to manage that on an ongoing basis. We'll talk about bid modifiers and some of the tools to help you with both the building of that, of all of those pieces, and a bit of what to do from there. Week 5, we'll dig into quality score. So quality score is really the key to the whole system. But until we've got everything built, there's no point going and talking about that. Quality score, effectively, Google's giving us a number from 1 to 10 of what it thinks we're like as an advertiser. It gives us that number at the keyword level. There are more quality scores hiding behind the scenes. But we'll talk about what it is, how to find it, how to improve it, when to worry about it, when not to. Talk about landing pages, what needs to be on there, what landing page quality score really means, and we'll talk a bit about Google Shopping campaigns, as a gentleman was asking about this morning on the Q&A webinar. So that'll happen in week 5. Then when we got everything built and we understand the whole game, now we can start to dig in and talk about tracking, but we have to talk about tracking before we get onto display network. So we'll talk about Google Analytics in some detail. I've got a little surprise bonus coming up for you in a minute around that, which Brian doesn't know about, just to scare him. We've got conversion tracking, all of the different ways that you can track success here, and we'll talk a bit about Google Tag Manager. We are in the process of getting all of our clients, certainly all of our lead gen clients, I think now already on this. E-commerce is a little bit more complicated depending on the skills of the web development team, of the client, I mean. But Tag Manager is a wonderful tool by Google that will make your life much easier. We'll talk about what it is, how to use it. Week 7, we dig into my favorite corner of AdWords, which is the display network. So that's where we'll talk about that thing I've just been going on about, display select. We'll talk about remarketing, dynamic remarketing, Google Analytics remarketing, which is incredibly powerful, and we're getting some fantastic results there. I mentioned in the Mastermind Members forum the other day, we're getting e-commerce display ads that are converting at 12%. I'm going to show you exactly how to do that and my whole system for doing that. That's in week 7. And we'll talk a bit about YouTube and YouTube remarketing then too, because that really falls under the display network banner. And then at the end, week 8, where to from here? How do you manage this thing from an ongoing basis from here? We'll talk a bit about AdWords scripts, some hacks that we've developed, and how to put a sensible workflow around this, particularly if you're doing this for clients. What's the 80-20 of the 80-20, really? What can you do in the time that you've got available to run a profitable business and yet keep this account performing very, very well and profitably for your clients? So that's how the 8 weeks breaks down. That's the sequence of events, which is the second S. Before I go on to the third S, you were going to ask me a question.
Let's wait till after the third S. But I'll tell you what the term is. The term is affinity, and affinity marketing. So that's what you get to define for us. But go ahead.
Affinity will happen in week 7. I'll define it in a second.
Perfect.
The last S is stakes. How do you raise the stakes so that you learn faster and on a deeper level? And what I'm going to say is you need to spend a bit of money over the course of this 8 weeks. You can do it in theory, but you're just not going to learn as much. You're not going to learn it on as deep a level. I don't care if that's your own money or a client's money. I prefer it if it was your own money, because you'll learn much faster when you're spending your own money. But assuming that you're not wasting a client's money and you're not spending willy-nilly, then that's good too. You're going to learn so much more if you've got an account to apply these lessons to as we go through. And that's the fourth S, or the third S, sorry, of the DIS formula, which again Tim Ferriss created in 4-Hour Chef. So we're going to figure out what all the Lego blocks are, then we're going to put them in the right order. We're going to figure out the 80-20 of all of that. But if you can raise the stakes, that'll just make the whole game much more interesting to play. Affinity targeting. So where Google is heading in the near future is focusing much more on what it calls behavioral targeting. So keywords are great. Targeting people based on what they search in Google is fantastic. That's not going away anytime soon, and that's why we're going to cover it in great detail next week. On the display side, and I've already mentioned a few of these other sort of crossovers between display and search. RLSA is one, display select is another. Again, we'll go into all of that detail as we go. But where Google is going is it wants to focus more and more on what our behaviors are on Google, because it should come as no surprise to anybody that Google knows an awful lot about all of us. It knows every search term we type into Google. It knows every website we go to. It knows how long we spend there. It knows, to some degree, which websites we spend money on. Analytics is on something like 56% of websites worldwide. So at a high level, Google has an enormous amount of data. It used to have a display targeting option called interest targeting. That got retired a couple of weeks ago. So loosely speaking, Google would try and identify the things that you were interested in based on your browsing habits. That's been retired a couple of weeks ago, and it's been replaced by two different targeting options. Affinity is one, and you may have seen on that screen a little while ago, in market. I'll just briefly explain both so you know what they are and how useful they can be, and just to whet your appetite so you can't wait for week 7. Affinity is a longer term interest that you have demonstrated based on your browsing habits. So if you tend to go to the basketball section of ESPN every day, and you go to a whole bunch of basketball sites, and you spend longer there than the average person, and you go there more often than the average person, Google is going to say, right, you have an affinity with basketball, or maybe sports in general. And there are lots of categories. I think there are 89 at this point in time. All these categories that Google has broken down, everything from savvy parents to avid investors to foodies and fashionistas. And these are ways that you can target your ad. You can say to Google, show this banner ad for my book, The 4-Hour Chef, to foodies. Show my home study guide for parents and blah, 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 to savvy parents. That's a longer term interest that you've demonstrated, or that your prospects have demonstrated over time. In market is at the other end of the scale, and that's a very short term behavior that someone is demonstrating. So based on the recent searches that someone has done, as well as their browsing history, they have demonstrated that they are in the market for a particular product or service. There are about 500 or so of these at the moment. Everything from business class travel to 5-star hotels in New York to fridge, freezer, or washing machine. So many different options and different ways that breaks down. Someone is in the market for antivirus software because they've been searching for Norton and AVG and all those other things. Now, Google doesn't know if they've bought yet, but it knows based on their recent behavior that they are probably in the market for this, that they are in the market for a new SUV. We've got a client that sells cars, and this is a wonderful targeting option for them, and there are many, many, many ways that breaks down. I can even target by new or used car. I can even target some of the brands. I know if they're in the market for a new Chrysler or a new Audi. Now, it's not perfect. Google is inferring all of this based on the massive data that it has available, and it's not quite the same as Facebook's interest targeting, because you tell Facebook, to a certain extent, what you're interested in, which movies and books you're interested in. And there's different types of targeting in Facebook, and there's a whole bunch of discussion there, but this isn't the Facebook Mastery course. This is the AdWords one, so we won't talk a lot about that. But affinity and in-market, two relatively new ways. They've been around a little while now, but they have improved a lot over the past 12 months. Two different ways of targeting your banner ads. When we get to Display Network, I'll talk exactly about how to do that. Good enough? Answer?
Perfect.
Cool.
Onward to mastery.
Onward to mastery. I read this lovely quote by what's his name? Neil deGrasse Tyson, the really funny physicist dude, lovely guy. He talks about
successor to Carl Sagan. Yes.
Yeah. It's funny if you get to watch his YouTubes; they're amazing, and his book's great too. But he talks about detail is not understanding. If you're too far away from something, you can't see it, you can't tell what it is. If you're too close, then you still don't really get any idea of what it is. It's only if you get the right level of distance away from something that you can see clearly what it is. Once you know what it is, then you can zoom in and you understand what you're looking at. You maybe can zoom all the way back and still know what you're looking at. But you need to be able to be looking at this at the right level of detail to get the maximum understanding. That's really my job over the next 8 weeks, is to zoom in or out to the right level to give you the greatest understanding, which, funnily enough, is also what I've noticed makes a very good AdWords manager, an AdWords person to run accounts. Someone with the ability to zoom in or out. So if you like playing chess, if you like playing strategy games, I used to love Command and Conquer, Red Alert, Civilization, Rome, all of those games, the city builder stuff, where you are zooming out, managing the whole board, managing the whole city, and then zooming in and fixing one little area and telling, I don't know, that farm to grow more wheat or whatever, I don't know what it is. But that ability to zoom in and out, to play both the general, looking at the whole map, and the soldier fighting a particular fight. If you love that stuff, brilliant. You're in the right place. If you hate those games, that may become more evident as we go. And your job may then be to realize that, actually, I shouldn't be the person spending 5 or 10 or 40 hours a week inside the AdWords account. My job is to know this enough to outsource it well, because I hate all that stuff. Well, you might find you're very, very strategic, but you don't like detail. Well, that'll become as evident as we go through. The ability to zoom in and out is a key skill, for running an AdWords account well. So if you like any of those sort of strategic games, you're probably going to be okay. And then we also need to talk about the 3 things that are going on here. Google is trying to balance 3 very different groups of people and keep all 3 of them happy and hugging each other. It's obviously concerned about its stakeholders, about the people that make money out of Google. Its job really there is to improve market share. They've done a pretty good job of that. We all use Google rather than Yahoo or Bing or Census or whatever it might be. It wants to keep you, the advertiser, happy. If it keeps you happy as an advertiser, you spend more money. Google's shareholders do well. But first and foremost, and I know that the cynics among us may think that first and foremost they care about the cash and the $16 billion a quarter and so on, but it's very clear inside the organization that there is a deep-seated cultural thing around first and foremost it's about the user. If they do a good job of looking after the user, everything else takes care of itself. That's why Quality Score was invented. It wasn't to make life hard for you, the advertiser. It was to give the user a better experience, because they figured out a way where computers could decide what was a good ad and a bad ad to show to somebody. That meant our experience of using Google was vastly better. And it was better than Yahoo. It was so much better than Yellow Pages that we stopped using those other things, and Alta Vista and Lycos and all those things that we used to use 15 years ago. And we all started using Google because they figured out how to give us what we were looking for. We've all experienced that. Google is like the mind reader. We expect it to know almost before we got there. And now, let's not go off on that tangent, but Google Now on your phone, if you've used that, it's mind-blowing. It'll trawl through your emails and it'll pop up information that it believes is going to be relevant for you now. And it's scarily accurate, and that's only going to continue over the coming years. Google is trying to balance this, so it's good to understand how the game is played from Google's point of view. As long as you know that Google first and foremost wants a good experience for the user, that helps shape then the way you think about your account, how you do what you do. It's not just about you trying to spend money. And we get emails from people, well, we spend 50 grand a month. Can't you just tell Google blah, blah, blah? Well, no. Google don't care about you. And not just because you only spend 50 grand a month, which you may think is an enormous amount of money, but Google doesn't. Google cares about how good you are for the user. And part of that too is that Google sees ads as information. They don't see ads as an annoyance. And this is why they're heading down this behavioral targeting road. If they can show the right ad to the right person at the right time, then they believe they're doing that person a service. And obviously then, if that is a good ad for that user, more users are going to click. It's going to be a better experience for the user. I mean, you could argue that using the internet with no ads at all would be wonderful. And yet, would it? Because then the big companies with the huge SEO budgets would all jam their sites at the top. The wonderful thing about AdWords is that it levels the playing field, and that we, as small businesses, are able to compete with the big guys. And usually, just quietly, usually it's those big guys with huge budgets that do very, very idiotic things within their account. And they're usually some of the worst accounts that we see. The wonderful thing about Quality Score is it evens the playing field, and we can compete. So, let's talk about goals, because this really is where we need to start. Why do you have a website? There needs to be, now again, if you're doing this for a client or you're doing this for your own business, hopefully the business objective is known. The objective, therefore, of the website should be an extension of that. It should be aligned with the overall business goals. But you want to get very, very clear on why you or why your client, and that may seem like a ridiculously obvious question to answer, but ask your client that question, because that will help give you some clarity around how success is going to be measured. Because you'll hear some ridiculous things here of, oh, we just want to be above that guy, or we want more likes than this guy over here, or we want to be higher on the page than these guys because we've been around longer. Well, that's really not why you have a website. You have a website, should be, to drive leads and sales to the business. Therefore, why do you have AdWords? Well, because that's the best tool to enable you to do that. Probably. It should at least be tested. And that testing thing is, for me, the #1 reason that you have an AdWords account. So most people will answer this, why do you have AdWords? To get more traffic. My argument would be, actually, it's about testing, first and foremost. The strategic byproduct, to use another Dan Sullivan term, the strategic byproduct of an AdWords account is that you get a lot of quality traffic to your site. But first and foremost, it's about testing. Inside the account itself, you're testing keywords, you're testing ad copy, you're testing bids. Every keyword has a correct bid. Do you have that bid? You're testing targeting. Which geography do I show my ads in? Which city, which location, which region, which country? Which device or devices should I be showing ads on? Which placements should I be using for my display campaigns? Which remarketing audiences should I be using? And how should I be using them? Plus, you can test much faster than the page itself. Which landing page should I be using on my site? Which page gets me the best result? If you're going to be doing any kind of testing, you need traffic to help test that. You can test the business idea itself very quickly and relatively cheaply by being able to quickly get a ton of people through that site and see really early on if actually it's a bust, which has happened a couple of times. The goal of all this being to have a positive ROI account. We talked about this on the Q&A a couple of hours ago. What's the Holy Grail? For me, the Holy Grail is maximizing profit. That's the job of all of this testing within the AdWords account. To do that, obviously, we need to measure something. It would be insane to run an AdWords account without measuring anything. The whole point of this is that every bloody little thing can be measured. Every penny can be accounted for.
Mike, can I send you back a slide? Would that be okay? Picture that mad scientist. It just occurred to me as you were saying that it comes down to where are my customers and what do they respond to?
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
Pretty much everything else in AdWords kind of expands out of that, because it collapses down to where are my customers and what do they respond to. Yeah, I just had that thought. I just had to share.
Yeah, no, that's good. And how do I find it? I'll talk about the bullseye within the bullseye in a little bit, but how do I find the best bits of all of that, and how do I find them as quickly as possible?
Absolutely.
So I'll come back to this. You wouldn't dream of driving a car without a dashboard. Not only do you want to know how fast you can go, you want to know if things are overheating, i.e. when is it about to break, when am I about to do something wrong. You need that dashboard. And from an AdWords point of view, I'm going to suggest that you want one main KPI to focus on. That, in an ideal world, would be profit. But profit doesn't exist as a number inside your AdWords account. You can certainly calculate it. We can talk more about that as we go through the course. We use a proprietary number inside the agency called a savvy number. I'll explain how we do that if you want, but it's probably going to be, for now, reducing your CPA, i.e. getting leads or sales cheaper than you're currently getting, or it's probably going to be increasing the number of conversions. And Brian, I know you've always done with Bobsled Run, you always start at the beginning of that by asking participants to set that goal. So I would ask you to do that now on the piece of paper that you've got. Write down which number it is in your account that you want to move. That might be total traffic. I would suggest that it shouldn't be something like click-through rate or cost per click, because they're vanity metrics, they're easy to game, and I'll explain exactly how in week 4. I think it's probably going to be number of conversions or CPA for you, but it depends a little on your situation, and it also depends a little on your experience with AdWords to this point. But pick the one number that you want to move so that you're focused on that as we go through, and you can see everything through that lens. And then also write down underneath that what your goal at the end of this 8 weeks is to move that number by. What improvement do you want to see in that one KPI? Because there's lots and lots of different things that we can measure, and thank you for throwing that in the chat. A KPI is a key performance indicator. It's a number. It's a metric. Sorry, KPI is jargon. One main number.
We all have jargon we use that sometimes we have to stop and explain to those around us. So
yeah, I want to keep this as absolute jargon-free as I can until we sort of build on, again, the layers and the sequencing. There'll be a lot more jargon in week 8. But pick that number and figure out what it is for you. So onto the freebie. So a couple of URLs for you to write down. I've purposely picked URLs that don't have 1s or 0s or I's or O's in, so this should be very quick and easy to write down. Every shortened URL I'm going to give you over the course of the next 8 weeks will all start with GOO.GL. This is the Google URL shortener, so you only really need to quickly jot down the last 6 letters or numbers there, and of course you will get a copy of all of these slides within the next, I'm guessing, knowing how wonderful Jeremy and Danielle are, probably in the next 24 hours. I haven't sent these to them yet. As soon as I send them to them, they'll be in the members area, so you'll have a PDF of all of these to go through, and we'll pull those links out. He's already done it. They're in the chat area, so you can just click on them and go straight there now. Obviously, the chat area will close at the end of the webinar, so click on those links that's in the chat box right now. This is a workshop that I gave, I think the beginning of last year. It may even be a little longer ago. It's about a 2.5 hour workshop that I gave on Google Analytics. It's quite a high level with a bit of detail. I would encourage you to watch those over the course of the next week. I'm going to go into
high level. You mean it's like bird's eye view?
Yeah, it's more so it's analytics for the business owner, not
Right.
for the web developer or for the practitioner of how to do certain things. It's more of the high level
High
view.
level doesn't mean like PhD level. High level means
Oh, no. Sorry, yeah.
means bird's eye
Helicopter.
view.
Bird's eye view. Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you for clearing that up. So your minimum required homework, and I won't keep calling it homework because there are negative connotations around that, but the first half hour of video 1 digs a lot deeper into all of the things that you can track on your website. It'll help you identify what all of those things are, again, be it your website or a client website. And this is the bit that, I don't know, less than 5% of people that use analytics do, probably less than 1% actually go and do, to identify all of those things, to work out which one of those you can track, because you might not be able to track everything that you want to track, but then to put a number, to play a scoring game and put a number of points next to each one of those things. I didn't include it this week because I thought it would become somewhat overwhelming. I recognise that at least half of you could care less about this bit. You've got some tracking in place. That's good enough for now. And I'm going to talk more about this in week 6 anyway, so bugger it, I don't have any more time. I'll just wait until week 6. Thanks, Mike. But if you really want to go for the Overachiever Award, at least spend the first 30 minutes of video 1 here. This is about 2.5 hours or so in total, video 1, video 2. But it goes into a lot more detail than we have here and gives you some time to pause and reflect, to have your website in front of you and to create a list of all of those things that you want to track. And then we can start talking about how we track all of that stuff inside AdWords a little later on. But for now, just get very clear on what that main number is that you want to track, because it will give you something to focus on. An investment mindset. For me, AdWords is so wonderful because it's this. Marketing done well is a vending machine, not a slot machine. A slot machine, you put your dollar in, you pull the handle, and you cross your fingers and you hope, oh no, I didn't get anything back. So I put another dollar in, I pull the handle and I hope, and oh no, I lost that as well. And you don't know what's going to happen next. With a vending machine, you have certainty when you put the money in and you press that button that I'm going to get a Coke Zero or whatever it might be. AdWords is the monetary equivalent, once you've got it set up, of the vending machine. You put your dollar in, you run some ads, you get $1.50 back. You keep 50 cents, you put $1 back in, you make another $1.50. Our job over the next 8 weeks is to improve your vending machine so that you have a $3 button and then a $5 button and then a $10 button, so that you can put $1 in, press the $10 button and get $10 back. That'd be a nice game to play. Keep 5, put $5 in, press the button, get $50 out. That is the promise of a good AdWords account. I don't like to use terms like money machine, but yeah, I think it's a vending machine. There is certainty over what happens. It's scalable, it's predictable, and it's measurable. Another part of this mindset around investment is how you think about your revenue. You can choose to focus on the lifetime value of a new customer that AdWords has generated for you if you want, or if you prefer, you can focus on just the first sale. I'd suggest that probably a longer term approach is better. Now, for instance, let me put that in concrete terms. AdWords generates a new customer for you and they spend $100. You can choose to look at just that first sale of $100 and say, is AdWords profitable or not? And if it's costing $120 to get that first sale, it's not profitable. But if that customer goes on to buy 3 times a year for an average of 3 years, and they actually make 9 purchases of $900, it would be fairer to take that into account. One of our clients has superb referral systems in their business, and they know that for every new customer they bring in, they're going to get an additional 1.3 leads in the next few months from each customer. So this thing sort of becomes almost self-perpetuating, but they factor that in. Now, they've been in business 20, 25 years, so it's easier for them to do that. When you're starting out, you don't know those numbers. All I'm saying is, as you go, it's ideal if you can have that mindset of, it's not just about the first sale. My job now, having made the first sale, is to knock the socks off these people, read a book called Raving Fans, and to absolutely delight them so that they come back and buy from me again and again. Unless you're selling coffins, in which case they probably won't buy more than once.
But their happy family members might well do that.
But they might, and their friends might.
And Mike, just on that theme, this is just kind of a business fundamental for everyone. I'm sticking a link in the chat box. Sorry if that distracts, but it's a very tiny little small graphic, easy to understand. There's nothing more fundamental in my understanding of business than these two basic things that I show in this little link, and this little simple mind map graphic. A prosperous business does two things. It repeatably and sustainably finds buyers, and it repeatably and sustainably delivers the goods. And I'm not aware of anything more fundamental to business than those two essential activities. And so, Mike, what you're helping us with here is the left-hand side of that, which is about repeatably and sustainably finding buyers. And the reality is, if you cannot continually, repeatably, and sustainably find buyers for your business, you don't have a business. You may be you may be lucky enough to have customers coming into your door, but if you don't have any actual control over that, then you really don't have a business. So I just wanted to share that little concept, because once you understand that, all kinds of other things really fall into place. So
and AdWords for us is the absolute best way to ensure, for most businesses, to ensure that happens. This is a worksheet which I'm happy to share in the members area. I'll try and remember. I'll make a note to myself to put this into the Google Plus area at the end of this call. I'm going to give you a link to the Google Plus community at the end of this call as well. So don't worry, that's coming in a few minutes. To do this, to calculate our target cost per sale, we need to start at the end of the process. And the reason that we talked about lifetime value before this slide is, use in box 1 there, use whatever profit makes sense for you. You can use a revenue number there, you can use a profit amount, you can use that first sale amount, or a lifetime value. It's entirely up to you. Use a number that closely represents for you what one successful sale is worth to your business. It doesn't have to be profit, it can be revenue. Pick a number there. Then you want to work backwards through the sales funnel, through the process that your customer, your client, your client goes through. What's the step before they sign on the dotted line? Is that a in-person meeting? Is that a phone call? Is that just on the website? What happens, and what's the close rate of that? So in this example, you can see we've said it's maybe an in-person consultation, and they close, in other words, they sell 80% of those. So I'm starting to work backwards through the process. Okay, well, what happens before that? What happens before that consultation? Okay, maybe it's a phone call. So how many phone calls do I need to generate step 2? In this case, the example we've used is I need 3 phone calls to generate 1 consultation, which is a 33% rate. And then how do I get phone calls? What's the step prior to that? So, okay, maybe this is the website piece, and I need 5 people filling in that form in order to get 1 lead, 1 phone call happening. And then we just multiply all those numbers together. And in this case, you see we end up with $264. I cannot spend more than $264 to get one person to fill in that form on my website. And this now gives me the break even. And I walked through the example. I'm going to guess that almost all of us were on the Q&A call a little while ago. I don't think those numbers are necessary again unless a bunch of people ask for it in the question panel and Brian interrupts me here. But until I know that break even, until I know that maximum allowable CPA, I don't know how much wiggle room I've got. I don't know how much leeway I have to change the numbers in my account. So the second part of what you need to do over the course of the next week is to work through. You can use this sheet, which I'll share, or you can just do it on the back of an envelope, but try and figure out as closely as you can. Start at the end, start with a customer, because it's much easier to think about that, and start with what they're worth to you, however you choose to value that, and then work backwards through the process of how they became a customer. So if you're an e-commerce website, this is going to be very, very easy for you. If you're a complicated, long time frame consultative sale process, this will be a bit harder for you. It'll take a bit longer. But you really want to get clear on this number at the bottom here. What's this maximum allowable cost per lead? What can you most afford to spend? Where does this cease to become profitable? Because that then affects everything that we do over the next 7 weeks once you know that for you.
Mike, I cannot emphasize how absolutely right you are on this particular point. Having mathematical clarity on what your goal is. It actually took me years to get to this point, but like years of working with people in their AdWords accounts. But I finally learned a few years ago that absolutely everything begins with your objective right here, and I can't do intelligent consultation or intelligent work in anyone's AdWords account until I have clear sense of what kind of number, what kind of metrics we want to end up with. So let's say I want 250 conversions a month and I want it at a cost per conversion of no more than $9. My current conversion rate is 5%. That means at my current conversion rate, I'm going to need 5,000 clicks a month in order to reach a goal of 250 conversions. I can afford to spend no more than 45 cents per click in order to achieve that, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And once I know that, all of a sudden, everything becomes so much clearer. Everything.
Yeah.
And it's the first thing I do when I look at an AdWords account. The first. In fact, I will not proceed until the person who owns the account can clearly state to me what it is they want their dollars to actually look like. Otherwise, there's nothing I can do in a person's AdWords account until they've actually calculated that and figured it out for me.
You cannot, no, it's not you don't know, so you cannot know how to best help them. And I know that many of us on the call are doing this for other people. This has to happen possibly even before you start. This is really part of the sales process, because until you know this, you don't even know if you can help them. So we'll go through this.
It is page one in your conversation with your client. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's how we were able to work out, in the example I gave 3 hours ago, that for that particular client, they were getting leads at $30, but their break even was $100. We knew there was a lot of wiggle room to play with there. We knew that actually trying to get $30 down to $20 would be a disservice for this client, because we could see all of this potential in the account. And actually, by being able to increase that CPA to 40, we were able to double the number of conversions. I explained all the numbers earlier. I won't go through it again. Almost double the profit, which may be counterintuitive to you that a $40 CPA is better than a $30 CPA. But until you have all of the pieces of the puzzle, you cannot make that decision. And that's why this is so, so important. And I see so many people talk about, we're just going to reduce your CPA. We're going to get that down by $5 or $10 or whatever it's going to be. You don't know yet if that is the right solution. You've got to do the math bit first. So I'll share that in the Google community in a few minutes. A dear friend of ours, Glenn Livingston, talks about the concept of bullseye keywords. So you know the elevator pitch. You've got 30 seconds to talk to someone about what it is that you do, or at a B&I meeting or something like that. You've got 30 seconds to explain your business. Go. Or Glenn says, let's just boil that right down. You've got 3 words to tell me what your business is. If you only had one keyword, what would it be? Once you know that, you get much more clarity over where to start, because the days are gone of starting with 50 or 100,000 or a million keywords, mixing and matching every keyword combination under the sun, loading them all up into your account, throwing it all against the wall and hoping like hell that something is actually profitable in there. The reason that's changed is because of quality score and the way the Google system works. You are far better off these days, and I actually had a consult with a guy yesterday where this was the exact case for him. Hi Sven, if you're listening, where for him it actually made a lot more sense to cut away a lot of what was in the account, to boil it right down to just a few core keywords. If you're an AdWords geek and you understand what exact match is already, fantastic. For him, that was the best thing to do, just a few exact match keywords, so he had absolute control over what was happening and who was seeing his ads within reason. Don't talk to me about close variations just yet. We'll get into that next week. But he now has much more control, because if you can't get the yellow ring on the archery target profitable, if you can't get your best keywords profitable, there's not much point testing a whole bunch of more generic, broader, less relevant keywords. They are less likely to be profitable. So we've taken Glenn's bullseye approach and applied that to every facet of the AdWords account. It's the bullseye within the bullseye. When you look at any segment of the account, any segment of data, I'm always got this concept in mind now. What's the bullseye within the bullseye? Okay, so if I'm going to show across the whole of the states, I might dig into how are the different states performing, and maybe Florida and California are much, much cheaper, and maybe Arizona and Texas are in there as well, and they're much cheaper compared to the colder states in the north. Well, there's the bullseye within the bullseye. We can put those states in the yellow circle in here. Then we've got a bunch of states that are a bit more expensive. They go in the red banner. And then there's a few that are not really very profitable at all. They go in the blue area of the bullseye target, of the archery target. And then there's a whole bunch that aren't profitable in the black and even the white rings on the archery target. We're going to stop those as quickly as possible. Our goal then is to fill up the bucket in the middle, is to fill up our bullseye states or keywords, whatever that might be, and get as much as possible out of those. And only when we've exhausted the most profitable do we move grudgingly outwards to the next concentric ring on the target. And if that's still profitable, then we're going to maximize that. And then if that's we've exhausted that, and if the blue ring is profitable, then we'll go spend money there. From a campaign point of view, I showed you a slide right at the beginning with all of the different types of things that you can do inside an AdWords account. Your brand campaign is almost always going to be by far the most profitable. We'll have an argument about whether or not you should use that campaign in week 4. That's almost always going to be the most profitable. Your remarketing campaign is probably going to be the next most profitable. So the goal with this is to spend as much money as you can, and there is going to be a finite limit to how much you can spend because there's a finite number of people searching for a particular keyword. Spend as much money there and then move on to the next campaign. Spend as much money as you can there profitably and then move on to the next campaign. All campaigns are not created equal, and this applies to campaigns, it applies to geographies, it applies to devices. You know, one of the quickest ways that you can save money in a lot of AdWords account is to turn mobile off. Get desktops and tablets, which are now joined at the hip and we can't separate the two, get that profitable first, make sure they've got a half decent mobile website, then we can turn mobile back on and start testing that. Again, if you're a bit of an AdWords geek and the phrase search partners means anything to you, and don't worry if it doesn't yet, because we're going to get to this, it's just an example. Turning off search partners can often be a very quick way to improve an account. Not always, but often. So within any dimension, within any slice and dice of the data, there is a bullseye. Keep that in mind as we go through and constantly be questioning what's the bullseye within the bullseye for this chunk of numbers, or data set if you're going to be a geek, that I'm looking at right now. The goal again is to have unlimited budgets on the stuff that is profitable. Because if you're spending $1 to make 5, why do you only want to spend $2? You want to be robbing banks to spend as much money on that game as possible without getting caught.
If you don't have the game of Monopoly loaded up on your iPad or your iPhone or your Droid or what have you, spend the $4.99 and buy the app and play it for a while, because it really is the same concept. One of the objects or one of the key steps on the way to winning a game of Monopoly is being able to spend more money and build more houses and hotels on your properties. And that's what you want to be able to do in Monopoly. And with Google AdWords, it's really the same thing. You want to be able to know that you can sustainably spend more than everybody else, because the advertiser who spends more than all of his competitors is eventually the one who's going to win the game.
If done right. If you don't go the way of the Fortune 1000 company that said, we'll throw $100,000 at this, and they have no idea what they're doing. Which
is why I say sustainably, meaning
yes, yeah.
You get the dollars back in multiples, which allows you to spend more in an AdWords campaign and get the top positions and get all the traffic at all the good hours of the day and so on. So
that's the investment mindset. So I'm very cautious, and I recognize that it looks a little bit like a dodgy selling tactic, but I'm very cautious in my proposals to clients that I talk about this is how much you're going to invest in AdWords. It's not how much you're going to spend in AdWords. There is certainly a period at the beginning where you're doing more testing, more investing, but you're not spending $10,000 a month. You're investing it to get leads and sales into the business. Again, if you can, when you get that positive ROI, you shouldn't be limiting it. It's an old, when I went to uni, which is a long time ago, and learnt marketing, you had a pie chart, and you did this little corner of this segment of the pie went on TV, and this segment went on radio, because basically nobody knew what was working. But if you've got this little segment of the pie called AdWords, and you know that it returns $5.50 for every dollar you tip into the vending machine, why limit it to that little segment of pie? Why not spend? Unless there is a physical constraint in the business. There might be a cash constraint. There might be a capacity constraint. We had a client that called us 3 months in and said, I don't know what you boys are doing, but please turn it off because the guys on the factory floor cannot keep up. If there is a physical constraint, then that's fine. Then you can limit your budgets. But the goal should be to have unlimited budgets.
And you can go buy a copy of Eli Goldratt's Theory of Constraint.
Yes. Yeah, that's a wonderful series of books.
Work on that. So,
RIP. I've touched on this already, and this is the last little section here. User first. Google thinks in terms of user first. Again, the cynics may argue with me, but I promise you that they do. If the user has a good experience of using Google, if they get what they're looking for, they will come back and use Google again. That keeps the advertisers happy. The advertisers spend more money. That keeps the Google shareholders and stakeholders happy and getting their bonus checks and keeping their jobs by concentrating on the user first. Keep that mentality in your mind as you go through. The psychology of search hasn't changed. People are searching for answers to their questions. Perry always says they're looking for a scratch for their itch. They're looking for answers. So had we been having this discussion a year or two ago, and this is the point where I would have started talking about personas and persona marketing. It's been a buzzword in marketing for probably the last 5-10 years. And it looks a little bit like this. As a blank, I want to do blank so that blank. The problem with the first two parts of this is we're making way too many assumptions. The as a blank bit at the beginning is irrelevant. And I want to do this. Well, how do we know? Maybe there's a better way, as the graphic there shows. The model that I'm starting to use, and I will be completely transparent here, this is very new for me. I only heard about this very recently. I'm going to say probably about a month ago. A wonderful podcast with a couple of guys called Austin and Chad. They didn't invent this. I just heard about it through their podcast, E-Commerce Influence. This is a Clay Christensen thing, which you may have heard, Innovator's Dilemma, and maybe read some of his books. Ed Dale recommended a book. I'll see if I've got it in my notes here. I was on a call with Ed the other day, and no, I don't have it in front of me. I'll find it. I'll stick it in the members area. I think it's something like, how do you measure your life? And he said it was the best short version of this that he's ever read, the most practical and implementable version. So I ordered it immediately. I'm still waiting for it to arrive from Amazon. But think about your customers in terms of this job to be done framework. A persona talks about a group of people based on demographic or maybe psychographic targeting. Julie is 32 years old and she drives a convertible Audi and she watches so-and-so TV show and she's got 1.3 kids and a dog and a budgie and blah, 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 blah. Well, that's great if you're buying TV or you're buying radio, because there was no other way to think about your customers. But the world has changed. Much better to think about your customers as a group of people with a common problem that needs to be solved. I don't care really how old they are. I mean, obviously there's exceptions to this. If you sell seniors travel insurance, then most of your customers are probably going to be 65 plus. But there is a common problem that they are trying to solve. And what the Jobs to be Done framework says is that they're actually hiring a usually short-term solution for that. And so we've got to think much more about why they hire. And I do like this term that they use of hiring a solution, not necessarily buying. They are hiring a short-term solution to the problem. It makes us really think about the why much more deeply. So this is the bit that you want to write down. When blank happens, I want to blank so I can blank. We're looking at the situation, the motivation, and the expected outcome. And we can start to frame every problem now, every problem that they're searching for an answer for, in these terms. And we'll focus first on the trigger, the causation. What caused them to be looking for the solution to their problem right now? We're going to talk about a wonderful bloke called Joe Sugarman in week 3, who has written a couple of fantastic books, one of them called Triggers, and I'm actually going to give you a mind map, a summary that I've done of the 28 or 29 triggers that Joe talks about in that book. If you can find a copy of that book, knock yourself out. It's quite expensive. They're very hard to find. I think it's out of print. But I'll give you the summary, the net of all of that in week 3. It's a wonderful tool to use as part of your ad writing arsenal. But you really start to focus on, okay, they're looking for that. I don't care what product or service it is that you sell. A guy on the Q&A call before made cabinets, I think, or restored cabinets. Forgive me if I've got that wrong. What's the problem that they've got? Okay, we've identified that, but why now? Why are you looking for me now? What just happened? What was the situation that just occurred that caused you to go looking for this now? And now the motivation. What is it that they want to achieve? What do they want to do? What's the motivation behind that, the problem that they're trying to solve, and what's that expected outcome that they're looking for? So on your sheet of paper, write down when blank, I want to blank so I can blank. We're going to talk more about that in week 3. And if you want to play around with this is quite an interesting tool. Another short code, again, GOO.GL, another shortcode for you at the top of the screen there. This is a tool that Google put together called the Customer Journey to Online Purchase. You can just Google that phrase if you like. And you get to play around. You can see in the paragraph in the middle of your screen, explore how marketing channels for, and it gives you options of small, medium, or large businesses in the blank industry in pick a country influence the purchase decision. And this little chart down the bottom here jumps around depending on the options that you choose from the drop downs. And it's really quite interesting to see on the whole how people behave in a particular market. It gives you some really good insights, particularly around if you should be using non-brand ads, brand ads, and particularly display, it sort of shows you where display fits in the picture. And sometimes it's over on the left of the chart, and sometimes it's over on the right of the chart, the timeline obviously being from left to right across the bottom. Very interesting to play with. Not massively useful, but very interesting to play with. Thought I'd give you a little toy to go play with. So another shortcode at the top of your screen. So this is the URL that you've been waiting for. This is an invite-only Google Plus community. So goo.gl/g, lowercase o. Damn it, I put an O in there. I wasn't meant to do that. Capital W, capital F, lowercase h, capital F. Go there. I will then approve your access to that group, and over the course of the next few days and weeks, no doubt, more and more people will trickle in as they watch the replays for this, and I will share this link at the beginning of every week. That's the place where we're all going to meet online. I will be spending quite a fair bit of time in there over the course of the next 8 weeks, answering any questions that aren't covered, any confusion that needs to be cleared up, and I will also be putting all of the files, the PDF that I covered, that I mentioned, the CPA sheet that I had before. Brian, if you flick me the glossary, I'll load it up into there as well. Now, because I believe there's a members area on the Perry Marshall side as well, right, where all of this stuff, where all the slides and the recordings and everything else will go. So this is a double up. Yeah, I won't have the recordings to put in here. I'm not sure if Jeremy or Daniel are able to do that. So best bet, log into the Perry Marshall site for all of the files. I'll make sure that we've got some double ups of files in here, but this is the place to go for the discussion bit and for the Q&A and for the place to get your questions answered. So I'll leave that URL on screen for a little longer. Actually, I'll come back to that in a second. Next week, we're going to talk about keywords. I'll leave it on that slide. And just checking with you to see if there are any questions that need to be answered before we jump off.
Not on this one. We're pretty good. Although Tori did ask, did you say turning search partners off can be a quick win?
Right. Okay. Well, yeah. Let's go there. Yes. So, first thing you need to do is so if you're brand new to AdWords, ignore the next 3 minutes because I'm going to use jargon. First thing, go to probably start with a campaign report. And segment, so use the little segment drop down to segment by network with search partners, and scan your eye down that list and see how the relative performance is for each of your campaigns. And it's important to do this at a campaign level because that's where the controls are for search partners, and see if search partners is better or worse than AdWords traffic. Now you may well find that you probably get I'm going to guess 10%-ish of your leads from search partners if you have search partners turned on, and CPA may be better, but often it is worse than Google search. The problem with search partners is it's either all on or all off. That's a campaign level setting, but for the campaigns where search partner is worse, that's assuming that you're maximizing that you're focused on the CPA number, and I know we've talked about the reasons for not focusing on that, but let's just assume that we're going the simplified version. We're focusing on CPA. For those campaigns where CPA is higher from search partners, you may choose to turn search partners off just for those campaigns, and you get an immediate bump in performance for the account. Same deal with segmenting by device. One of the first things we do, and we discussed this in an audit webinar about 3 or 4 months ago, is to segment that whole account by device and to look down the list, desktop, mobile, tablet, and how's that mobile performance compared to my desktop and tablet, because I may be able to get a very quick win simply turning mobile off or dropping the bids for mobile by half, or telling the client to go get a decent mobile website because it's 2015, whatever the case may be. But often turning mobile off can be a quick win, particularly if you're bumping up against those budgets. So if the account is constrained, if there's more traffic available but you're not showing in front of it, you're bumping up against those budgets, you turn mobile off. In other words, you cut out the expensive traffic, which frees up the cash to go after the good traffic, and you go and get a bunch more sales or leads for that money. Great little bump in performance. Hope that made sense without any pictures to follow along to. And thanks for the question, Tori.
And next time there will be
there will indeed
to go along.
There will be many slides next week. You'll be drowning in slides at the end of next week. But it'll be the 80-20, and they'll be in the right sequence to aid your learning. So that's why the order of the weeks is the order that it is. I've been teaching AdWords for, I guess, the best part of 10 years, because I taught somebody in 2004 how to do it. I'd only just learned at the time, but apparently they wanted to learn from me. So I've got a pretty good idea of what the order is of these Lego blocks, which order to learn them in and how to stack them together.
You know, on a Sunday evening in November of 2002, when I was living in a mountain city in China, Perry was visiting me, and in about 7 minutes' time, he taught me how to use Google AdWords. Needless to say, it's a little more complicated now, a decade and a half later. So,
a little more expensive, bit more complicated.
But the fundamentals can actually be explained in 7 minutes. But yeah, let's see. We got some thank yous and some good comments. Let's see. So David says, I also own the Digital AdWords Bootcamp from previous years and have started working through it. Is there any part of that I should not review and work through because I'll have to unlearn or might confuse myself when compared to the new information you're rolling out for us? Any thoughts on that, Mike?
I don't know specifically what information is in there, but look, I learned from Perry back in the day, 10 years ago, and Brian and I and Perry have continued to work very, very closely since then. I'm pretty sure we're all on the same page, literally.
Yeah.
We wrote the book together. I don't think there's going to be anything you need to unlearn. My job is to give you maybe some finer distinctions and to help clarify some of those points and to add in the newer stuff that has come along even since the book was written and since that last course was created. So if anything, no, I think the more fundamental education you can cram under your belt before we dig into the nitty-gritty, so much the better. I doubt very much there's anything in there to be unlearned. And apart from, there's a couple of tiny little pieces, like the way that Display Network used to work. I've taught before some of the tools that we use to build Display Network campaigns. There's a few little things there that have changed. But knowing that, if you went and learnt that, and then you get the new stuff here in week 7, it's not going to be confusing. It's just, if anything, it's just going to give you a better base to build on and a better foundation to build on.
Right. And I put together the last AdWords Bootcamp material, and I tried very hard to make it very evergreen principle based. So I don't think you'll find any conflict there. So let's see. Got a hello from a fellow AdWords user in Melbourne. There. So we've got a fellow who I think is in the Netherlands. So you stayed up late, and I really appreciate that. Great to have you on. Let's see, a question about, is there a CPA metric in AdWords? I think the really short answer to that question is yes.
Yes, absolutely. There are actually many different ways that AdWords measures conversions. We'll talk about that a lot in week 6, and a brand new feature called customized columns, which I'm going to dig into in week 6 as well, to make life much, much easier than it has been in the past of how to see all of that data. But short answer is a resounding yes.
Perfect. And John asked, can you repeat again what KPI stands for? And the answer is KPI means Key Performance Indicator. Some number or metric that's really, really important to how well you're functioning. So that's what that is. Mike, anything else from your end before we close?
No, I'm good. Whoever's in Melbourne, come and join me for lunch. I'm about to go.
That'll be awesome. So he says he's at a cafe in Melbourne. So
excellent.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everyone. And we will see you on the next session and dig into keywords.
Fantastic. See you in a week's time.
Bye now.